and look and get out. Couldn't do that 3 years ago.
Andy Daigle didn't think he would make it this far. A few years ago, the now 61-year-old business manager for Subaru in Louisiana was diagnosed with kidney cancer, an illness that kills nearly 15,000 Americans every year.
August 13th of 2013, easy date to remember. He said, "You have a mass on your kidney."
Following multiple surgeries, including the removal of his kidney, Daigle is currently cancer-free, but the path he took to get there is rare. He's among the less than 5% of American cancer patients who participate in clinical trials. Daigle was part of a trial for the drug pazopanib, which was being studied for people who have recurring tumors. Being part of the trial meant extra care. But as with other patients, he didn't know if the trial would save his life, give him a bit more time to live, or do nothing at all.
The trials, as they were explained to me, not a cure. It's just about life extension. Like if this would get you an extra 6 months, an extra year, an extra 2 years. Because there is no cure for what I have. All we can do is manage.
How's it going? Good to
For his doctor, Scott Delacrioux, how and why Daigle responded to the trial as he did is actually unknown.
The effect on an individual patient for a clinical trial is never known. Right now, he's got no evidence of cancer. So he's doing well. He's watching his grandkids grow up. The only way to answer that question, though, is not looking at one patient, Mr. Daigle. It's once the trials are fully accrued, what does a population of patients do?
Researching, developing, and getting approval for new cancer treatments is often a slow and arduous process. But without participation from patients like Andy Daigle, it takes longer to make medical advancements. While willingness to participate is one thing, access is another. About 90% of cancer patients are treated outside of major research hospitals, where the bulk of clinical trials occur. The smaller facilities they do visit for care often lack the funds or logistical support to run trials.
I don't think it's an unwillingness on a patient's part. I don't even think it's an unwillingness on a physician's part. It's really a systems error with the fact that patients don't have access unless they're willing to travel.
For years, nearly all of the cancer clinical trials in Louisiana were taking place at Charity Hospital in downtown New Orleans. But then came Hurricane Katrina, the storm flooding the bottom floors of the hospital, forcing its closure, and shuttering the state's primary cancer research center.
12 of them already said that they would participate.
Right,
For the researchers, the destruction presented an opportunity. With financial assistance from the National Cancer Institute, Louisiana State University Dr. Augusta Ochoa and his team helped re-envision Louisiana's clinical trial infrastructure. Rather than return to the centralized model, they looked to the broader oncology community in the state to build a network of researchers.
After Katrina, our only choice was to start working with community oncologists and community sites. I think this is a winning approach to bring clinical trials to the patients. They cannot be exclusively provided in specialized cancer centers.
What started with just a handful of sites has grown to a much wider network, now called the Gulf South NCORP Clinical Trials Network. The group consists of 22 treatment facilities and more than 90 investigators, including Dr. Delacrioux's practice in Metairie, Louisiana.
How are you doing?
I'm doing great, sir.
Once a month, 69-year-old Ferdinand Rosemain comes into the clinic as part of his clinical trial for his stage 4 prostate cancer.
Legs up.
Living more than 30 miles from New Orleans, he may not have had access to such a trial under the previous centralized system.
Yeah, that's it.
The data that's collected as part of his trial is shared with the Louisiana group, a crucial part of this new research network.
If we're able to push clinical trials into the community, it's going to give, number one, researchers the ability to answer questions that otherwise would take a lot longer to answer. And number two, it provides access to these clinical trials that otherwise patients don't have access to.
Louisiana's effort has tripled the number of patients enrolled in clinical trials. The network now within reach of 80% of Louisiana residents and even parts of Mississippi, giving Dr. David Hansen and his patients at the Mary Bird Perkins Cancer Center in Baton Rouge access to the same trials and information as those in Dr. Delacrioux's office.
The patients come from about a 10-parish area which surrounds Baton Rouge. Many of them are medically disadvantaged, either have no access to health care or have Medicaid that puts pretty significant restrictions on the kind of care they can get or the practitioners they can see.
Bolstered by a $5.6 million grant, from the National Cancer Institute in 2014, Louisiana researchers are trying to improve access for minorities and rural residents. These are populations that represent a significant number of patients seen by doctors at the cancer center. What has prevented minority groups and underserved groups from participating in clinical trials?
Well, you have to have access to care and access to a practitioner that's interested in doing that. And then oftentimes if you participate in a clinical trial, there are extra visits or extra issues that come along that make it more difficult. And so when a person looks at a menu and sees that they might have to come more often or on a very regulated basis because of the trial, they may turn that down.
The Baton Rouge Center has hired more researchers and nurses to assist with the trials and recruit more patients. 30% of the clinic's minority cancer patients are now enrolled in clinical trials. While Louisiana is pushing participation, a New York City company believes the broader sharing of data holds tremendous promise.
Everybody wants better drugs faster. It's better for patients, it's better for physicians, it's better for pharmaceutical companies. One of the challenges in research is simply it's slow and expensive.
Zach Weinberg is one of the co-founders of Flatiron Health. Launched in 2012, Flatiron has 450 employees. Software engineers, nurses, and doctors who have developed what they call a learning healthcare platform. It's a cloud-based patient treatment database where every patient is anonymized, but their medical records are accessible to the clinicians, researchers, universities, and drug companies who use it. The company has received funding from pharmaceutical companies and venture capital firms, including an arm of Google's parent company.
I think the electronic health record shift is a similar style infrastructure shift to the cell phone, which is we took all of these folks who essentially were disconnected from the grid and we gave them a phone and now they're fully connected. In healthcare, what we're doing is something really similar, whether it's identifying patients for clinical trials, making treatment recommendations, or even just helping physicians figure out what other docs are doing for similar types of patients.
Bobby Green heads Flatiron's clinical development team of the electronic medical records, but he's also a practicing oncologist. Every week he returns to his West Palm Beach, Florida clinic to treat cancer patients and test the company's system himself.
You actually can't do this without people who understand the science of oncology, without people who understand the practice of oncology, without people who really understand what happens in the real world day to day in an oncology clinic. Depression plan, castrate-resistant prostate cancer.
Often Dr. Green is shadowed by other employees from Flatiron, watching him interact with the software and patients. The record of what he's doing entered into Flatiron's database.
Every patient who walks in and out of that exam room in a different day has an experience, has something that they've gone through. And most of the time, no one has really learned from that experience. Whether they had a particular mutation or a particular biomarker and had a really good outcome or a really bad outcome, that knowledge and that information really gets wasted.
Wasted because before cloud computing, Dr. Green says it was very difficult to compare large data sets, the information often siloed or stuck in the clinic or point of care. If he was able to access that information, connecting the data would had to have been done manually, and only if it cleared the necessary regulatory hurdles. Flatiron's network allows him to make these comparisons, which he hopes might one day allow him to understand why William Lott has responded to his treatment the way he has.
Will, for example, has lived a lot longer than the average patient with the colon cancer that he's had and continues to do really well, much better than I think any of us would have expected.
Dr. Green has treated Lott for 16 years.
Is there a biomarker that he has? Does it have something to do with the fact that he had multiple myeloma before and got certain treatments related to that? We just don't know. But put that information together across a national database of cancer patients, and it can be really valuable.
5 years since its launch, the company says 2,500 oncology clinicians use and contribute to its database, which currently has almost 2 million patients. That's 1 out of every 8 cancer patients in the country. With the effort to bolster cancer research and data ongoing, not just in New York, but in places like Louisiana as well, the hope is new treatments will emerge sooner.
Yeah, what I'm thinking is that what I went through and the treatment, maybe sometime 5, 10, 15 years in the future, somebody else will get this. And what I helped to discover along the way would keep them from an early death, keep them living longer, keep their quality of life longer. If I was a guinea pig for that, that's, you can't ask for much more than that in life.